Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a US elections special, a Trump-Harris showdown update. I haven't done one for ages, probably the best part of a week, so there's an awful lot of news to cover. This is going to be another massive sort of long video with all sorts of different topics, hopefully discussed, and there will be things that I've missed because just an awful lot is happening and I only have one very small brain to be able to catch them. But the first thing I'll talk about is something that you will know if you've watched my Ukraine war update videos, because this has rocked the political scene in the US, but has also had deep implications for the war in Ukraine. And this is the idea that Russia is interfering, not even the idea, it's the fact that Russia is interfering in the US election, and that is becoming more and more apparent. What does this say about the election itself? I don't know, other than I don't know the effect, to be honest, but there has been this huge bit of news over the last week that the DOJ, Department of Justice, has indicted as well, sitting alongside a number of sanctions against entities and individuals. The Department of Justice has indicted a number of people concerning particularly this Tenet media organization that was set up as a kind of shell company for the Russians to launder their information through the US electorate. And this company was run by Lauren Chen and her husband, two right-wing influencers, actually Canadian, who have then used that money and given it to, knowingly, they have given it to these YouTube influencers who unwittingly, at least that's their defense, have peddled the Russian disinformation, though they claim they didn't know where the money came from. But it seems rather careless to not to wonder particularly hard where $100,000 per episode of a video comes from. But nonetheless, that's happened. So we have this really big news, but the Republicans have taken this on, well, Fox News, for example, as the media arm of the Republican Party, has taken that as not as seriously as it should be. And they are trying to sell it as a Democrat plan to muddy the waters, etc., etc. But this is a really big concern to US democracy, and the Russians are indeed meddling. I mean, you can see all sorts of headlines here. US accuses Russia of interfering with the presidential election. US says Russian bots are Russia Today operatives sought to interfere in US election. Sprawling US election interference campaign. We have had the claim that the Russians are wanting, and indeed you can see this all over Russian propaganda, actually, literally on their TVs. They are very much calling for a Trump win. They'd like Trump to win. They see that as wholly divisive. But yeah, the Russian interference campaign and influence campaign is looking to either sow outright division with culture war issues and throw a hand grenade into the US electorate and run away and just watch what happens eating popcorn, or if they're not just being so overtly divisive for its own ends. They are trying to its own end. They are also trying to support Donald Trump more overtly, and that is, I think, a real worry. But it's interesting then this is from today, I gather. This is what Donald Trump says about this.
It started again. The Justice Department said Russia may be involved in our elections again. You see?
So already he's downplaying it. He's treating it as almost funny, as, oh God, they're doing this again. Those Democrats, they're trying to say that Russia, they're interfering. It's freaking serious. And this is absolutely the wrong thing that you should be doing if you're interested in free and fair democratic elections in the US and national security of the country.
See that, Mr. Congressman? Great congressman from Texas. You see that? Russia, it's Russia. And the whole world laughed at him this time. 2.5 years, not a phone call made to Russia, not anything to do with Russia, except stopping their pipeline and lots of other things that these people approved. And they said just the other day, the Attorney General, we are looking at Russia. And I said, oh, no, it's Russia, Russia, Russia all over again. But they don't look at China, and they don't look at Iran. They look at Russia. I don't know what it is with poor Russia. That's very, but you know what?
I don't know what it is with poor Russia. So absolutely egregious comments there, in my opinion, from Donald Trump. It's just completely, almost jovially downplaying the threat of Russian interference there. And I think that is a dangerous game to play. Now, what was interesting, so getting on to some bits and pieces of news concerning the campaigns, what was absolutely incredible is that Trump finally, after 4 years, acknowledged losing the 2020 election. And he said he lost it by a whisker. Those were his words. Now, this has actually caused, he said this in an interview, and we'll look at this in a second, but it has caused quite some fallout because he spent 4 years saying that the election was stolen, etc., 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 taking all these people along with him who have fully become invested in the stolen election narrative. And then he's gone, oh yeah, we lost it by a whisker, which was true. That's the truth. And some of these people have gone, hang on, you've just spent 4 years telling us that it was stolen. Where does that leave us now? And actually, this has really peed off a bunch of people. But anyway, this is what he said in an interview
Second time
with Lex Friedman.
Millions more votes than I got the first time. I was told if I got 63 million, which is what I got the first time, you would win. You can't not win. And I got millions of more votes than that, and lost by a whisker. And look what happened to the world with all of the wars and all of the problems.
So he goes on to say, etc., etc. Goes on to talk about other things, but losing by a whisker has then really let the cat out of the bag, and that cat is now amongst the pigeons, and those pigeons are squawking. And one of these pigeons is right-wing white nationalist Nick Fuentes, who is, I believe he was one of the ones who's gone and had a dinner in the White House, because that's when Trump was in as president. That's who he likes to hang out with. He's now blasted Trump for admitting that he lost the 2020 election. So let's listen to this.
So why did we do Stop the Steal? Why did anyone go to January 6th? Why is anyone sitting in jail? Why did anything bad happen to anybody? Why did everyone get censored? Why is everything bad that has happened to the people that are involved, why did that need to happen if you're just going to walk it all back and say, oh, I lost? Well, it would have been good to know that before 1,600 people got charged. It would have been good to know that before I had all my money frozen, put on a no-fly list, banned from everything, lost all banking and payment processing. Would have been good to know that before I, in 2017, dedicated my life to this as an 18-year-old in college. Just feels like a big ripoff. And don't get me wrong, I'm an adult. It's not whining. I'm not complaining about it. I'm saying you can't say those things for that reason. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't regret anything, and we all make our choices. And look, it didn't work out. It is what it is. So I'm not mad saying I want those years back. I want those decisions back. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that just goes to show what a tremendous betrayal it is. It's just such a callous indifference to the sacrifices that his supporters made on his behalf.
Now, I'm no fan of Nick Fuentes. Of course I'm not. But he's spot on there. He's absolutely spot on. And those people have every right to be super, super pissed off with Donald Trump. And I think he said a couple of things over the last week that indicate that I think there was another time that he let it out as well, that he genuinely lost the election. So yeah, that's happened, and Nick Fuentes has disavowed him, which is it's no bad thing being disavowed by a white nationalist, but actually that might affect Donald Trump's kind of PR and some of his base, perhaps, when we are going to be talking about incredibly tight margins in this election. And there's absolutely no doubt, we'll talk about polls later, but absolutely no doubt this election is the tightest ever. In fact, This is the only election in history, is it, where there have been no consecutive days or something like that of above 5% difference between the two parties. Literally the whole time it's been within 5% either way, and that has never been seen before. This is literally the closest election, as according to polls, on record. I think I'm correct in saying that. Right. Okay. Now there is going to be a debate, and it's all about the debate. The debate it is so hotly anticipated. And what's interesting is trying to work out what each camp think about the debate. So first of all, the rules, and the Harris team have lost this one a little bit because they wanted the rules these rules were supposed to be for the Biden Trump debate, and there was a lot of talk about actually, well, no, that was then, this is now, we need to work out the rules. But actually they seem to have gone with the rules that the Biden team wanted, but actually the Harris team don't want. The Biden team wanted Donald Trump's mic to be turned off so that Biden could get out his information. Didn't want to be talked over, didn't want to get into this situation where the Biden, who was looking weaker and weaker, might be over-talked by Trump, and he might look weak. Kamala Harris is a whole different kettle of fish. Now, she is a prosecutor, and actually having Trump try to talk over her, one, would have made Trump look poor form, and wouldn't have been good for PR on what is going to be watched by an awful lot of people. And if Trump had tried that whole, I think what he tried back in 2016 with Hillary Clinton, and tried that kind of menacing or talking over or that kind of approach, I think it just wouldn't have gone down well. And they were hoping, the Harris team was hoping, that actually the mics would be turned on and that he would try and do that, and she would have a way of dealing with that that would make him look really bad, essentially. But and Trump's team wanted the mics to be shut off because they recognized that. So his advisors were, and we know this because this is what they've got. So prima facie, it's obviously what they wanted, because we know that the Harris team didn't want it, so someone must have wanted it. Those are the rules. So the Trump team wanted this, and also Trump let out the bag that his team wanted this, and he said, I'm not bothered myself, I'm happy. Trump's obviously happy just saying whatever and doing whatever he does. He doesn't like being constrained by these rules and by other people. So he came out and said recently, oh yeah, no, my team want that, but I'm happy talking, and blah blah blah. So anyway, these rules I think will benefit Trump, or at least they won't disbenefit him, is that a word, to the degree that they would have previously done. Okay, the debate will be 90 minutes, 2 commercial breaks, 2 seated moderators. They'll be the only people asking questions. Coin flip's already been done to see who speaks first. I think it's Trump. It's won that coin flip. No opening statements. Closing statements will be 2 minutes per candidate. I'll stand behind podiums for the debate. No props or pre-written notes. No topics or questions will be shared in advance with the campaigns or candidates. Candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, 2-minute rebuttals, and 1 extra minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Candidates' microphones will be live only for the candidate whose turn it is to speak, and muted when the time belongs to the other candidate. Candidates will not be permitted to ask questions of each other. Campaign staff may not interact with candidates during commercial breaks. Moderators will seek to enforce timing agreements and ensure a civilized discussion. No audience in the room. So actually this, I think, just really does benefit Trump, because you want Trump to be unhinged. You want Trump to show to the general public that he is the person we all know he is. And we the Democrats would want that to happen, because it won't make Trump look good. Okay, now, actually, is that... No, we will... no, I'll bring this up later. That's supposed to be later. We'll talk about endorsements for particularly Kamala Harris, as there are very few endorsements for Trump. Now, what has happened? Goodness me. Okay. A couple of things. First of all, Trump has not been campaigning much at all. And this has got his team and certain supporters very worried. He's been basically And it could be that there were some legal things happening, but it could be that the campaign was in a bit of a tailspin, but he hasn't been out on the campaign trail. He had very few speaking engagements, and the Harris-Walz campaign were out busy hitting, doing talks for unions, hitting those Great Lakes states and making sure that their economic message was starting to get out there. Interview with CNN happened. Arguably should be more interviews, but they are certainly out there and getting that, if you like, free advertising from doing that kind of activity. Trump hasn't been doing that. What is going on there? Is he showing his age? Like, is his heart not in it? All these kinds of things going on. But then he has done a few speaking engagements, and I have to say they have been, on the whole, absolutely terrible. I mean, properly bad. You've got this situation where, and I've long said this, and it appears to be reflected presently, my opinions, in exactly in these all of these talks that Trump is giving, and exactly what he's saying and how he's saying it reflects that. My opinion is Trump is not very knowledgeable about policy. He was never knowledgeable about policy when he was ruling from 2016 to 2020. What's my opinion of the whole 2016 tenure and what would happen in 2024 onwards if he won is that he's a populist leader that is actually fairly ignorant of politics in general. He's ideologically vacuous. There is a vacuum of ideology that gets filled by other people, but he doesn't have the requisite knowledge. So, for example, when you actually listen to his words, and this is the same from 2016 to 2020, listen to his words on foreign policy. When he's talking about foreign policy, he boils it down to very simple, this is how you do a business deal, that's how I see it. He's never given any substance on anything of any use or meaningfulness. He has talked in absolute nonsenses about all sorts on the campaign trail. In fact, let's just play you a selection of stuff that he has said recently. I wasn't going to play you this, but actually this gives you a sense of what I think about Trump's lack of knowledge. It's fairly obvious because you can garner that from exactly what he says.
Anywhere near the nuclear codes.
The transgender thing is incredible. Think of it. Your kid goes to school and comes home a few days later with an operation. The school decides what's going to happen with your child. And many of these So
first of all, many of these children? The idea that someone goes to school and then has a transgender operation and comes back the next day, it comes back a few days later from school, and you as parents just didn't realise that. Like, the school's decided that they're going to be what are you talking about? Like, we can have sensible transgender discussions, but that's not it. That is what's called a straw man. You're forming a straw man of the actual argument so that you can tear it down. It's just a complete caricature.
15 years later say, what the hell happened? Who did this to me?
The real radicals on that issue are the Democrats, where you can have an abortion in the 9th month, and in 6 states, you're allowed to kill the baby after the baby is born. The execution.
Just again, what are you talking about? That is not a thing. There are not 6 states where you can murder babies. So he's just lying. He just doesn't know what he's talking about. He's got these kind of vague ideas that he then just regurgitates all the time, and no one corrects him. Or if they do correct him, he doesn't give a toss. Like he is deeply ignorant of substance, real detailed substance of any given subject.
Of a baby, because that's not abortion, that's the execution of a baby. You could actually execute the baby after birth. The wind, it kills our birds. If you want to see a bird cemetery, go under a windmill sometime. They do kill a hell of a lot of birds. Why do they love it? It kills all the birds.
Now, these are all...
So on and so forth. But one of his speeches that he gave was at this economic club, the Economic Club of New York, where he was just a rambling, incoherent mess. And this is what Jessica Tarlov has to say about it.
But today was also about Donald Trump's economic speech, and we watched a lot of it.
And by the way, the whole point of this was to be substantive, to lay out his economic policy or policies in a detailed way amongst supposedly a bunch of people who should know better and should be able to challenge him, not just ask questions, let him go blah, 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 and then go, all right, next question. Like actually say, hang on, you didn't answer the question. Hang on, that was absolute word salad. So, and that's what he did. He just word saladed his way through this talk.
I would dare any of you to listen to his answer on childcare and tell me what the hell he was talking about. It was one of the more incoherent things I've ever heard. He thinks tariffs are going to pay for everything. We know that they're a tax on the consumer. But this really highlights a big problem that everyone is saying, well, Trump is so transparent and Trump's out there and that's all that matters. What matters is the content of what he's saying. And none of it is explainable. This issue, which is a big priority for people, obviously a central plank of what's going on in the Harris campaign, he doesn't have an answer besides tariffs. And J.D. Vance yesterday was talking about just have grandma and grandpa do more, that's some sort of solution for people. He's going to have energy prices, drill baby drill, even though we're producing more oil than we ever have before, leading the world, more tax cuts for the rich, and tariffs are the only way that we're going to be paying for it.
I think tariffs are designed to punish countries who subsidize
but they don't work
their
that
products.
Way. And
no, for specific countries they do. Look, I know.
You know what?
I know tariffs.
So
and we'll actually come back to Josiah here from Pondering Politics. I'm going to go back to Chris Hayes now to just give you a sense of this economic discussion that actually took place.
Piles of dead birds under all the windmills. He's been saying stuff for a long time. It's more and more, I genuinely can't tell if he believes it or not himself. Like, is there a line anymore between deception and delusion? And if you actually ask him to articulate just a basic policy proposal, say on childcare, for instance, he just cannot do it.
And that is my point, is that he cannot give detail. He's never shown us detail. So I challenge you to disagree with me. Say, yeah, he knows detailed policy, and here's an example. You tell me when he's gone into real detailed exposition of political, of policy in the last whenever.
November, can you commit to prioritizing legislation to make childcare affordable? And if so, what specific piece of legislation will you advance?
So remember, the question here is what specific piece of legislation will you advance concerning childcare policy? What specific piece of legislation will you advance? Does he answer the question? Of course he doesn't.
Well, I would do that, and we're sitting down. You know, I was we had Senator Marco Rubio, and my daughter Ivanka was so impactful on that issue. It's a very important issue. But I think when you talk about the kind of numbers that I'm talking about, that because look, childcare is childcare. There's something, you have to have it. In this country, you have to have it. But when you talk about those numbers compared to the kind of numbers that I'm talking about by taxing foreign nations at levels that they're not used to, but they'll get used to it very quickly. And it's not going to stop them from doing business with us, but they'll have a very substantial tax when they send product into our country. Those numbers are so much bigger than any numbers that we're talking about, including childcare, that it's going to take care. We're going to have, I look forward to having no deficits within a fairly short period of time. Coupled with the reductions that I told you about on waste and fraud and all of the other things that are going on in our country, because I have to stay with childcare. I want to stay with childcare, but those numbers are small relative to the kind of economic numbers that I'm talking about, including growth, but growth also headed up by what the plan is that I just told you about. We're going to be taking in trillions of dollars. And as much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kind of numbers we'll be taking in. We're going to make this into an incredible country that can afford to take care of its people, and then we'll worry about the rest of the world. Let's help other people. But we're going to take care of our country first. This is about America first. It's about make America great again. We have to do it because right now we're a failing nation. So we'll take care of it. Thank you.
I am disgusted that 3 of that panel at least are clapping that, because he just ended with "Make America Great Again." Like, that's a permission for people to clap, and people in the audience are clapping. Yeah, make America great again. No, you are something. So what happened here? Before we'll let him, Chris Hayes, and then Josiah from Pondering Politics give their opinion. What actually happened here was Trump has absolutely freaking no idea about any childcare policy whatsoever. And if you go through how that worked, and actually I have a good, I almost want to play it to you again, so you understand. He has no idea about anything to do with childcare. And he probably wasn't expecting this, but he should still know what his own childcare policy should be if he was president, right? Harris sure as shit knows what her policies are. This is like a major area. So he's been asked that, and what he does is like, I don't know anything about childcare, but what I do know a bit about, but actually he doesn't really know about tariffs either. Like, he doesn't know about the negative impacts of tariff and the inflationary pressures it'll put on, and then the other things you have to put in place to try and deal with that, so on and so forth. He's got this idea that we'll put tariffs on, that will raise loads of money, and the money that childcare, whatever my policy is, I don't know what my policy is, but whatever it is, it's a little number and it's only going to cost this much, and tariffs will bring in this much. And it's only a little bit for childcare, but huge amount for tariffs. And make America great again, yeah, because we'll look after other countries when, and he's just pivoting to something that he wants to talk about, even though what he wants to talk about, and he feels confident about talking about that, he knows virtually nothing about that either. It's absolutely incredible. I am going to show you, I am going to play this to you again, because I think you do need to understand how this conversation works.
Will you advance?
Well, I would do that, and we're sitting down. You know, I was somebody, we had Senator Marco Rubio, and my daughter Ivanka was so impactful on that issue. It's a very important.
So it's a very important issue. What issue? Childcare. Okay, it's an important issue. Marco Rubio and Ivanka Trump were very impactful. In what way? This is meaningless twaddle, and it has nothing to do with what are you going to do in 2025 onwards with regard to childcare. I can give a toss what Ivanka Trump and Marco Rubio did back then, especially when you don't know, because it's just they were impactful.
Issue. But I think when you talk about the kind of numbers that I'm talking about...
We're not talking about numbers. She asked what frickin' policy. What do you mean numbers? So he's just going to money, cost. When we talk about the numbers, like, what are the issues with childcare? The non-provision childcare, so people aren't going to work because they had to provide childcare for their children because it's too expensive to put them into childcare. So what's the government going to do to either make that cheaper or do, you know, what are these policies you are going to do to get as many people working as possible whilst having children educated and cared for and supported in the way that they need to be, such that, etc., etc. Well, that's the kind of stuff you want to be talking about. I could probably, off the top of my head, answer more coherently to that question than you do.
That, because look, childcare is childcare. It couldn't, you know, there's something, you have to have it in this country.
Brilliant. Childcare is childcare. You have to have it in this country. What does that make? Just
You have to have it. But when you talk about those numbers compared to the kind of numbers that I'm talking about by taxing foreign nations at levels that they're not used to, but they'll get used to it very quickly. And it's not going to stop them from doing business with us, but they'll have...
Notice as he's turning to the audience, he's like, oh, yeah. So I'm talking to you about tariffs now. Childcare, forget childcare. Yeah, so as you know, they'll get used to tariffs. It'll be fine, but we'll get loads of numbers, big numbers, bigger numbers you've ever seen. Big number, little number, big number, big number. We'll have a big number. And childcare, little number. Yeah.
Very substantial tax when they send product into our country. Those numbers are so much bigger than any numbers that we're talking about, including childcare, that it's going to take care. We're going to have, I look forward to having no deficits within a fairly short period of time, coupled with the reductions that I told you about on waste and fraud and all of the other things that are going.
So what he's answering is how we're going to pay for childcare. I'm not telling you what substantive policy it is. I'm saying we're going to pay for it, and we're going to do that by tariffs and stuff I talked about earlier. So, you know, not wasting any money. I get Elon Musk in to be in charge of wastage, because he didn't waste a shed load of money buying Twitter, and he didn't also get loads of government handouts in the course of his rise to the top, etc., etc., etc.
Going on in our country, because I have to stay with childcare. I want to stay with childcare, but
Please
those
do.
numbers are small relative to the kind of economic numbers that I'm talking about, including growth, but growth also headed up by what the plan is that I just told you about. We're going to be taking in trillions of dollars, and as much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kind of numbers we'll be taking in. We're going to make this into
So he just said the same thing 3 times.
an incredible country that can afford to take care of its people, and then we'll worry about the rest of the world. Let's help other people. But we're going to take care of our country first. This is about America first. It's about make America great again. We have to do it because right now we're a failing nation. So we'll take care of it. Thank you.
4 out of 6 people, all the men clapping, women not clapping, although she's smiling. Maybe she's smiling because that was the biggest bunch of arse she's ever heard.
The applaud at the end. After he's like falling all over, he does a Simone Biles dismount. MAGA. You get all that? Remember, the question was, what specific piece of legislation will you advance to keep childcare costs down? Okay? Now, again, here's a contrast. Here's the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. She's the Democratic nominee. Here she is with her specific plan to help offset the cost of childcare.
Under my plan, more than 100 million Americans will get a tax cut, and we will do this by restoring 2 tax cuts designed to help middle-class and working Americans. The Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit. Through which millions of Americans with children got to keep more of their hard-earned income. So as president, I'll not only restore that tax cut, but expand it. We will provide $6,000 in tax relief to families during the first year of a child's life.
So there you have it. A little bit of a contrast. Now, you know, in Trump's defense, he was not on teleprompter. He was just riffing there. But I don't know, man. That's the quality of the brains right now that we got over there.
And his point is that, you know, people, as Josiah from Pondering Politics always says, they grade Trump on a curve, and it's kind of like they treat Trump differently. He can get away with saying absolute BS, nonsensical word salad, and Biden slipped on a few words, and they're like, oh, he's senile, and Trump gets to say all this complete and utter nonsense. So yeah, it's I think it is deeply unfair. I tell you what, Josiah is less than condoning of this kind of talk.
America great again. We have to do it because.
What the hell was that? Oh my God. That was objectively worse than literally anything that has ever left the mouth of President Joe Biden. If you're
absolutely bang on, you tell me when Joe Biden has nonsensically waffled as badly as that, and add all those other crazy things he talks about concerning, like the other day, bacon and then wind and all that kind of stuff. Just he's driveling this absolute garbage.
You're a conservative watching, if you're a Republican watching, if you're a centrist watching, if you are a person who has serious questions or doubts about President Biden's ability to communicate, if you are a critic of Joe Biden in this respect, let it be known that was objectively worse than literally anything to leave Joe Biden's mouth ever. The Harris campaign should just take that 2-minute clip and make every damn ad they possibly can. If 10 Americans see that, 8 of them, perhaps even 9, would say that Donald Trump needs to have his keys taken from him. It reminded me of a scene in...
So, and he goes on to talk about that, but there is interesting, I deleted it, but there was a tweet up there that I was going to show you of one of these analysts who shows that Chris Hayes clip, and then said, I showed this to my Republican neighbor, and said, yeah, just watch this. And the guy said, and then showed the Harris, and like, yeah, she made sense. And that was actually, I have to admit, it was really embarrassing. It was really cringy. And it was like, yeah, that's your man. Yeah, pretty incredible. So this is someone else's, a journalist's interpretation of what went on in that whole economic speech on that day.
To the extent that he said things that were coherent, and some of it was just sort of words randomly chosen out of a dictionary, I think. To the extent that he said anything that was coherent, it was kind of what we would expect. It was a promise of more income tax cuts, higher tariffs, which, by the way, tariffs are taxes. And if you look at the distribution of what he has proposed.
And what she's saying, tariffs are taxes. So if you're going to put a tariff on Chinese goods coming in, right, that is what you're doing is, say a widget comes in from China and it did cost $1 and you're going to make it cost $10, right? So you put these massive tariffs on those $9 that you are getting in them selling that widget. That extra money you're getting in is being spent by the consumer. So the consumer, whether it be a wholesaler or the end user already, is buying that widget now for $10 instead of $1. So your citizens are spending $9 more. So you're taking $9 of tax off the Chinese, but the Chinese aren't losing that money. They are still selling it for $10 as they were selling it for $1. They still get the same amount of money from that sale. The Chinese are not being taxed. That tax is effectively redirected to your citizens. So a citizen now has to buy that, or a company that then has to pass that price on to your electorate is buying that for now $10, and they're losing out. So effectively, you are taxing that citizen or that entity an extra $9. Tariffs are not a cost to the exporter from China. They're a cost to your electorate. And that Trump doesn't seem to understand that. He's like, we're going to have all these millions. Much bigger numbers in childcare. Those much bigger numbers are coming from your country. You are charging your country, you're not charging the Chinese. They still sell that stuff to your country. Your country's paying over the odds for it.
Most people would see more increase in taxes through tariffs than they would see tax cuts through income tax cuts. So some of that, offset. Yeah, it does. It more than gets wiped out. So you heard tariffs, taxes. You heard this government efficiency commission, which I think at best will probably do nothing. We've had lots of blue ribbon panels before. At worst, might help Donald Trump identify more enemies whom he can weaponize state power against. And then kind of more of the same deregulation, which he tried to do in the first term. And
I think that's a really good synopsis of that. Now, what you've got to understand, the other thing that he was promising were big tax cuts. And we'll come back to that idea. We're just going to digress a little bit to another issue that Donald Trump has at the moment in all his speeches, or not in a lot of his speeches, because he's made this mistake a number of times. Sometimes he corrects it, and sometimes he doesn't. So he keeps saying he's running against Biden. I was like, are we going to beat him here, Biden? And then sometimes you go, oh, Biden and Harris, as if like she is just the natural extension of Biden. But it's still this idea that he's running against Biden.
I can't imagine New Hampshire voting for him. Anybody in New Hampshire, because they're watching right now, but anybody in New Hampshire that votes for Biden and Kamala I really think.
So this is one of the ones where he corrects it. So he goes Biden and Kamala. But of course, he's talking about him. I can't think of it. Why would anyone be voting in New Hampshire for him? No one's going to be voting for him because he's not on the freaking ballot. Just, again, he keeps making this mistake, and yet he's not called out on it by Fox News, for example. It's like Biden senile, Biden senile, Biden senile, Biden senile. Oh, Trump says all this bonkers stuff. Let's forget that and concentrate on Kamala Harris being a communist. It's but I won't play all of this, but here's an example. So this is someone saying, I know that all of a sudden, very coincidentally, media doesn't care about age or mental acuity anymore. But as a reminder, here's 3 minutes straight of Trump confusing and forgetting people's names, the names of the city he's in, and more.
I think you should take a cognitive test like I did. I took a cognitive test and I aced it. Dr. Ronnie Johnson. Does everyone know Ronnie Johnson, congressman from Texas?
Ronnie
he was
Jackson.
The White House doctor. How good did Elise Stepanek do? You know, we've endorsed Dr.
Stepanek.
Ross. We've endorsed JP, right? JD Mandel. And
That's him trying to say JD Vance. JP, JV Mandel. I mean, now he's a VP, but this is going back a wee while, but not too long.
he's doing great. Jimmy Connors is
Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Connors is good. He's also happy.
Mike Bolton, John Bolton is here.
Mike Bolton, as you know, is in Russia.
And there was progress today. I look forward to solving it.
Thank you, Steve. It was Trump's fault. It's always Trump's fault. Can it ever be like Rick Gates's fault? I mean, it's always Trump's fault, Rick. By the way, they never report the crowd on January 6th. You know, Nikki Haley. You know, did you know they destroyed all of the information, all of the evidence, everything? Deleted and destroyed all of it, because of lots of things. Like Nikki Haley is in charge of security. We offered her
And of course, that was Nancy Pelosi, as we well know.
10,000 people. We have some of our great business leaders and leaders, period, right behind me. I may ask Marilyn Lockheed. We appreciate it very much, Tim.
Marilyn Houston of Lockheed Martin, and then Tim Cook of Apple. He calls Tim Apple famously.
Apple. Yes, please, Mr. Kurd.
Thank you very much for your time.
You know what was interesting? Joe Biden won against Barack Hussein Obama. Has anyone ever heard of him?
Arrest their leading political opponent.
And of course, Joe Biden didn't win against Obama. Obama was term limited, etc., etc. So there's 3 minutes of that, and it's just like nobody pulls them up on him from the right, or they all spent all that time pulling up Joe Biden on his verbal gaffes and said nothing about Trump's continued gaffes that he himself made. Right, Kamala Harris, just as a kind of like, this is, I don't know, just a random clip from one of her rallies at the moment, where you have Donald Trump riffing off script. He seems to have kind of bullet points on the teleprompter, and then he just goes off on one and gives you these weird anecdotes. And he's still doing the Hannibal Lecter. He's tried to now say that Hannibal Lecter, in his latest rally, says that Hannibal Lecter, who represents the migrants or something, like, so you're, what, cannibal? They're eating people? Migrants coming in and eating people? Like, just makes absolutely no sense. But this is just a normal bit of Kamala Harris.
Because, of course, that's the nature of who we are as Americans. We have dreams. We can see what is possible unburdened by what has been. We have aspirations. We have ambitions. And the system that is a good system is one that supports that and allows people the opportunity to go where they can see and imagine themselves to be. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about an opportunity economy. We fight for a future where every senior can retire with dignity. And so we will continue to defend Social Security and Medicare and pensions.
So that's just a normal part of the speech, but it's just very different, isn't it? Now, here we're going to get back onto the kind of economic talk by looking at what each side are doing in terms of trying to appeal economically to different segments of the electorate. So what the Harris campaign did this last week was go and hit some of these big union states up at the Great Lakes, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is one of these super important states. It's got 20 electoral votes. I thought it had 19, but it's 20 electoral votes. And it it's very important. So remember, you don't get voted in as a president on the most number of votes, because actually, last two elections you would have had. Well, of course we had Biden anyway, but we had Hillary Clinton would have got in on the public vote, so she got a couple million more than Trump, but Trump got them in particular places. And if you get them in these particular places, the population sort of correlates with the number of electoral votes that that state has. And if you add up all your electoral votes from different states, and you have over 270, then you get to win. So 538 is your magic number, which is why 538 is a number that you hear so often mentioned. 538 Polling is an organization, gets its name from the number of electoral votes. Okay, so that's for some of my international audience who might not have remembered that. So what the Harris campaign is doing is going to some of these states that are really key, like Pennsylvania, which is a tie at the moment, and it has a lot of electoral college votes. And so they need that, and it's a zero-sum game. So if you don't get those 20 electoral college votes, then the other side does. So actually 20 electoral college votes, it represents a 40-point difference. That's huge. So 20 off me and 20 on you. So you kind of need to double the electoral college votes, and that's why then it might look like there's a big difference between what Biden got in the last election and Trump got, but actually you can halve that, and that's really what it is. And we'll come to that a little bit later. But union workers have been a real target for the Harris campaign, where Trump has been going hard on like tax cuts for the rich, and we'll look at some of the things he said about that.
You make a great point there, Don, about the map in addition to the coalition building. And I want to come back to the map while we stay on this idea of union members and then business leaders, Matthew. Where is the difference there when it comes to how they're reacting to VP Harris at the top of the ticket? And where, in your view, do her pro-worker policies differ from Biden's, or don't they? Is she just...
So that map's really interesting because this is where she was visiting. So Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Detroit, Michigan, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You know, you've got Biden, who was big on unions, right? He was on a picket line. He's been seen as being very big with particularly white working class men in previous elections. So that he's been rolled out on this campaign trail alongside Walz and Harris to try and hit those unions and working class Americans.
Carrying that mantle.
Well, the second question I'll deal with first, Allie, is I don't think there's much difference between the two on the pro-worker policies. I think it's a continuation of what Joe Biden has pushed really for his...
So this is a chief strategist from the Bush-Cheney administration in 2004. So he's actually originally a Republican.
Entire life. The support of unions, the strength of workers, the raising the minimum wage, having a living wage, all of those the vice president supports in this. And so... I think that's where she is on that, and that's what I think is a benefit. The interesting thing about the coalition she's attempting to build and building in this is she has both union workers and workers behind her, but also most of the Fortune 500, I think, is very reluctant to support Donald Trump in this. Most of the business community realizes a stable leadership that's not chaotic like Donald Trump is better for them. And so she, interestingly, can have a coalition that is both pro-business, because they want stability, they want some predictability, and pro-worker simultaneously. What Donald Trump has is a lot of rich folks from Silicon Valley that seem to support him. It's not the business community, it's not the Fortune 500, it's sort of very wealthy folks that think they're going to get a benefit from his presidency.
Yeah.
Really interesting point there about how she's trying to attract business and the worker. And, you know, if you're trying to be really pro-union, that might be a bit of a warning sign for some of these anti-union corporations. And so that's a delicate line to try and walk there. Whereas Trump is just really going for the tax cuts for the rich, but relying on his populism on things like immigration to attract those working class workers. So he's not appealing in any meaningful economic sense to them, but on a cultural level. And I think that's interesting. But, you know, correct me if you think I'm wrong there.
they need to bridge
And by the way, this guy's a union guy that is talking.
the gap. But I've been trying to make this point quite inarticulately for some time now. Over the last 10 years, Donald Trump has not been held to a standard where he's had to articulate substantive positions. And as a result, he has campaign staff all around the country, up and down the ballots, who don't know how to pivot, who don't know how to cobble together substantive positions that you need to pull together the loosely based coalition to win a presidential election.
So what he's saying is that Donald Trump lacks any kind of knowledge or form for substantiating his positions vis-a-vis any policy. He's just, like I said, vacuous. And that's a problem because people don't quite know how to try and sell him then.
Donald Trump thus far in his career has just been allowed to bloviate, name call, and really engage in a whole lot of bombastic behavior to win elections. But it really does feel like with most shticks, the jig is really up on that. And we've seen that manifest with this abortion position, where this man is absolutely just in a whirlwind and doesn't know what to do. Now we see it in the marijuana stuff, but it's really reflective of the idea that he's never had to pin his campaign or his actual administration to substantive and executable ideas, and he's not going to be able to do so in a serious way in the next 60 days.
Substantive and executable ideas is really well put by that guy, a voter action fund guy as well. Now, what he said about abortion is, I haven't included this here, but I really should have. So he pivoted on abortion and actually did it in two different directions in one day. So he lives in Florida, and he gets a right to vote on a Florida bill on abortion. It's 6-week kind of abortion bill, and he said, well, 6 weeks isn't enough, and so I think it should be longer. So he said, basically, I think he intimated he was going to vote to elongate that time frame so that you wouldn't have 6-week abortions. Just 6 weeks. And then he got given loads of crap by the pro-life segment of his electorate, and changed his mind that day and said, I actually was going to vote against it. The problem he has is that the very powerful and loud part of his electorate, the MAGA ones particularly, but also the evangelicals, are very strong on anti-choice and anti-abortion. But the electorate in general, the national electorate in the US is very much pro-choice. And he knows that. And so he recognizes that at the moment, the Republicans are getting hammered on reproductive health care and reproductive rights. And he's trying to say to some of those people in the middle, remember, it's always about the middle. It's, you're not preaching to the converted. These people are always going to vote for you. Don't keep appealing to them. And that's a problem with the GOP at the moment, and what Trump's campaign has done hitherto is just concentrate on shoring up his MAGA base. You're not going to win the election when you've got a 46% hard ceiling on that base. You need to get more people voting for you particularly in these different places, and they are going to be driven by things like reproductive rights. So you need to appeal to them. Doubling down on 6-week abortions in Florida is not going to do that. So actually Trump was being somewhat sensible there, but then was pistol whipped by those evangelicals and pro-lifers, and then had to do a volte-face on what was a pretty reasonable position on abortion that would have attracted more of the electorate in general towards his cause. And that is a real issue. Okay, then this is going back to the economy more generally and who you're appealing to. So we've seen that the Harris-Biden campaign has gone to these different places to try and get the working class American voter, because they want to mobilize, particularly in Pennsylvania, where you've got the manufacturing industries and whatnot that have traditionally swayed. Those voters have arguably swayed the whole presidential election in terms of this being a prime battleground state. Does Trump appeal to those people? No, this is what his economic policy appears to be.
The fifth pillar of my plan is to make the Trump tax cuts permanent. They are massive tax cuts, biggest ever, permanent. and to cut taxes even more. And
so he said, I'm going to keep. So what happens is his tax cuts that he brought in the middle of his campaign. Is it 2018? They came in. They actually run out. And so what he wants to do is extend those tax cuts, which have already added, what is it, 8 trillion, whatever it is, to the national deficit. And he wants to keep that going and then add to them. So, and then make them even more. So even more tax cuts for the rich. And he says it, and he said something else in one of his things, like, if you're really rich, like, this is for you type thing. I forget the phraseology, but just blows my mind. So Podcast America, Pod Save America, team here, or two of them, cast their opinion on this.
I honestly think it was basically to seem serious and normal and to make the economy more of an issue in this campaign. I don't know that he accomplished any of those goals. It wasn't as bad as his normal set of remarks that, like, maybe it's a redo for that North Carolina speech from a couple weeks ago when he made fun of the idea he was supposed to be talking about the economy and ended up talking about the election and Joe Biden and a bunch of other stuff. But he didn't drive a consistent message. He didn't have anything really interesting to say. It was not in the clip we played, but when in talking about the commission, Trump said it would save us trillions of dollars. A commission that is going to save trillions of dollars is a commission that, by definition, has to slash Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah, because the government spent $6 trillion overall last year. That's the whole thing. So if you're going to save trillions off of that, that's not just cutting a few regulations and programs here and there.
And so in that,
and that's a really good point, and it shows you how unserious Trump is with regard to any kind of substantive policy exposition. Like, he's saying, "Oh, I'm going to cut trillions of dollars." Like, well, yeah, well, that's literally like a quarter of the budget. What are you doing? Like, where that means you're going to have swinging cuts all over the shop. Is that really what people want? Some kind of massive austerity coming on, where you're going to destroy the US welfare system? No, that's not going to be widely popular.
In that sense, I think he gave them the Harris campaign a bit of an opportunity to hit him on that.
His problem is the opposite of Biden's, which is people have good feelings about the outcome of whatever he did on the economy when he was president, but his individual policies are very unpopular. The tax cut, very unpopular. The tariffs, to the extent people know what tariffs are, when they learn about them, unpopular. Even his, people do want to cut government waste. They do want to take care of the deficit. Those pop in every poll. Donald Trump has nothing good to say about that because he added a ton to the deficit when he was president and is now proposing $10 trillion of tax cuts, which are not paid for by whatever cuts, right? And so, the more he gets into a debate with her about actual economic policy, I think the worse it is for him.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, yes.
If he stays in the gauzy, I managed the economy well and everything was great, and now everything's expensive, and he doesn't go beyond that. That's his strongest argument.
Right.
If he has to dig into that anymore and talk policy and talk about what he's going to do for the next 4 years, it's not as helpful to him.
In other words, he can't talk policy. He doesn't have the ability to talk policy, and he's in trouble when he's called upon to do so.
That's true on every issue for him. Once you get beyond that top gauzy level, you have to actually say. I think not for two reasons. One, his actual specific policies are quite unpopular. And two, he has no capacity to understand or speak about them coherently. I mean, when he got asked a question about childcare in there, his answer was,
Here you go again.
I know we didn't play that clip just because it was so rambling. It was completely it was almost impossible to understand. But he was basically, there was a Q&A afterwards, and someone asked him about childcare, and he just rambled on and on about how the tariffs are going to pay for the childcare, and he's going to keep the childcare, and childcare is actually not that expensive. And meanwhile, JD Vance is talking about why childcare is, universal childcare is I think it's class war against normal people.
Yeah, and you should just have your uncle and your parents watch your kids for you, as if they don't also have jobs in America.
Just crazy.
So yeah, I think that kind of gives you a sense of it. Well, in my opinion, where we are in terms of who's serious about policy. Now, there was these rumors about Trump campaign pulling out in New Hampshire. There was a leaked email, I think, or something, and then the person got removed, and they said, no, we're not pulling out in New Hampshire, but I think they kind of are no longer a battleground state. There is this idea that there are certain states that are now in play for Harris, and there are certain states that Trump thought would have been in play for the Republicans, but now aren't in play. So it's kind of switched where there are a bunch of... So if we go to the electoral map, which is here, so we're talking about like Virginia was thought to be possibly open for the... and New Hampshire as well, which is somewhere around there. Was it? No. Where's New Hampshire? Anyway, there it is. Is that New Hampshire? Yeah, New Hampshire up there. So only 4 electoral college votes. Virginia 13. They were kind of in play, and now they're not in play for the Trump campaign. And now that there are these other states that are in play for the Democrats, they're having to take resources away because they have far fewer resources, and we'll come to speak about this soon, but they're having to take resources of Republicans away from places like Virginia and New Hampshire and plug them into places where they thought they were safe. Like North Carolina is a good example. So yeah, it is not looking great in some respects for the Republicans in where they are expecting these battles to be fought. New leak here. Trump's co-campaign managers Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles warned staff in an internal email to stop talking to the press. Less than an hour ago, this was admittedly like 3 days ago, with the threat of termination. It must be a hot story in the works. So they're trying to be careful, keep a lid on leaks, and make sure that people aren't talking. There's been a lot of talk about panic going on behind the scenes. Now, one of the big things that's happened is the amount of money, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. The amount of money the Democrats have raised is absolutely phenomenal, and the Republicans are struggling to keep up. And this has meant that the Democrats are now able to spend an absolute bucket load of money in some of these states to the tune of a lot more than the Republicans. So Michigan, $55 million compared to the Republicans' $6.6 million. Arizona, $35 million compared to the Republicans' $10 million. Wisconsin, 33 against 3.5. So that's like 10 times the budget. 10 times the budget. Just insane. North Carolina, again, that one is 10 times the budget, 26 million to 2.8 million. That's one that wasn't in play, is now in play. Nevada, 19.5 to 1.4. Goodness me, that's over 10 times the budget. Omaha, 7 million to 0. That's infinitely more than the Republicans are spending. So you are starting to see the Democrat machine mobilize in so many places that they otherwise wouldn't have done because the money is there. John Tester, who is running in a Senate in Montana, Tester campaign plans a 7-figure push to bring out Montana tribal voters. So they're like spending lots of money getting out tribal voters, where the guy he's running against has just insulted tribal voters of being, drunk at 8 a.m. or whatever, he drinking at 8 a.m. or whatever he was saying. Which is not going to go down well. And then obviously the Democrats thinking, right, okay, let's mobilize that anger that might have brought about and get these Native American Indians, see if they can vote Democrat. So in places like Montana, it's looking like that could be good for the Senate race there. Another bit of news here: stock worth of Truth Social, Trump Media, has absolutely plummeted. Stock plunge wipes out Trump Media's extraordinary market gains. Truth Social shares closed down below $17 on Wednesday, reversing all gains since the company's rapid rise from January. And indeed, there it is, right down there. It's not looking good. What else? Vice President Harris is a communist who will destroy the economy, says MAGA, and basically what Trump is saying. But Goldman Sachs economists have predicted a stronger GDP and job growth if Kamala Harris wins. So Goldman sees a US GDP hit if Trump wins and a boost if Democrats sweep. Goldman economists lay out potential post-election effects, tariff policy, immigration measures seen as key elements. These are inflationary things. They're populist and popular with some of those base voters, or as Trump calls them, the basement voters in his support. behind closed doors. But anyway, that tariff policy, as mentioned, will be inflationary. Immigration measures will be inflationary. And actually, it's worth pointing out something he's just said today on inflation, which is highly controversial. And deporting all those people will put the cost of labor up. And you might think it's worth it, whatever your opinion is on immigration, but it will be inflationary, what he's planning on doing.
And getting them out will be a bloody story. Should have never been allowed to come into our...
This is what happens when you riff and you don't have a tightly scripted teleprompter speech to go off. You start saying things like, it will be a bloody story to get these immigrants out. He's predicting a bloodbath, like he said before in a different context, but it's like, it's not looking good. It's not the sort of thing
And getting them out will be a bloody story. Should have never been allowed to come into our country. Nobody checked them. And
so on and so forth. And then just another example of how things are not so enthusiastic on the GOP campaign trail. This is Kimberly Guilfoyle, who is she married to Donald Trump Jr., although I don't think that marriage is going well. She used to be married to the California governor, the Democrat, and isn't anymore. But anyway, she's here on the campaign trail. And it's a little bit cringe, a little bit embarrassing. Nobody seems enthused.
From all walks of life have had enough of the Democrats' decline, and we are ready, we are willing, and we are able to spark a new era of American exceptionalism. You can clap for that.
You can clap for that as three people. She builds to a crescendo and three people are clapping. As Ron Filikowski says, she gave an embarrassing speech at the Republican Party of Florida annual dinner tonight where she's barely able to get 5 people to clap for her applause lines. This is towards the end and where she's now begging for people to clap for her. So not going very well there. Right, a couple of bits on the vice president. We've got... I haven't got too much on Tim Walz. Haven't heard as much on him recently. We've got JD Vance saying that if I'd been VP, I would have told the states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, and so many others that we needed to have multiple slates of electors. And I think the US Congress should have fought over it from there. In other words, he says, I won't play this to you, but 2 minutes of basically saying that he would have engaged in the conspiracy to interfere with the lawful outcome of the election. And he said it out loud, as Joyce Aline here says. Basically towing the party line with regard to election denial. But of course, Trump's already told us that he lost that election by a whisker. JD Vance also claims that school shootings are a fact of life. So there's a horrific school shooting again. And there was no sympathy and no empathy shown at all by Trump or by JD Vance. It was pretty despicable. And of course, they're beholden to National Rifle Association, etc., etc. But...
Now, look, the Kamala Harris answer to this is to take law-abiding American citizens' guns away from them. That is what Kamala Harris wants to do. She says, look, I don't like this. I don't like to admit this. I don't like that this is a fact of life. But if you are a psycho and you want to make headlines, you realize that our schools are soft targets. And we have got to bolster security at our schools so that a person who walks through the front door...
So this whole point is not to solve the problem, but to put an even bigger sticking plaster on it. Yeah, I'm not going to solve that problem of people getting hold of guns and shooting kids. I'm not going to solve that problem. I'm going to say you can get hold of those guns. It's not a problem. Get hold of those guns. That's fine. You run around with guns. That's cool. And you can be a kid and running around with guns. I'm really not bothered about that. But if you come to the school, we just got to have more teachers with guns, more metal detectors, and we want to stop you here, but otherwise we're not going to stop the problem. Really, it's really terrible. I think ideology going on here.
Schools, so that a person who walks through the front door. We've got to bolster security so that if a psycho wants to walk through the front door and kill a bunch of children, they're not able to. And again, as a parent, do I want my kids' school to have additional security? No, of course I don't. I don't want my kids to go to school in a place where they feel like you've got to have additional security, but that is increasingly the reality that we live in. Now look,
it's just a fact of life. Just a fact of life. And so yeah, that's it. That's his thing, which is I don't want to. There's a school shootings by country. The US has the worst in the world. Now he would rather not prevent it. He'd rather not cure it, but just continually stick a plaster on it. And then another, this is just absolutely delightful. This is another great JD Vance charisma moment where this time he's wearing a hoodie. He looks a bit more relaxed, but he's meeting some people out and about.
Very well. How you doing?
Nice to see you, Marcy.
So doesn't fist bump her, grabs her fist, cabbage. And then the guy in the middle is like, I don't want to be here. I don't like JD Vance. I'm going.
Very well. How you doing?
Nice to see you, Marcy.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
First time here?
First time here. Yep.
Thank you for coming.
Of course.
All right, what can we do for you?
So he's gone to meet union workers, going back to the whole union thing, and he ain't too popular. And that was just cringe. Right, we're going to finish off, I've been talking for way too long, by looking at polls and endorsements. Interestingly, the polls are closing up a little bit. So that initial bounce of enthusiasm from the DNC, as you would expect, that's going to be your big moment. It's coming back down. It's all going to be about the debate, the upcoming debate. I'm wondering whether to do a live reaction to that as it happens and just sit in with that. It depends when it happens. If it's in the middle of the night, I probably won't be able to. But so yeah, 2.8 down from last time we did this video is about 3.2. And actually we're starting to see a few Trump up in the polls, which is kind of what you'd expect. They are New York Times, Siena, that aren't always seen as I think they skew a little bit Republican, but correct me if I'm wrong there. So that's not a massive surprise, but it is changing the direction of travel. So we have seen blue for all the polls basically for the best part of the last, since the DNC and before, and you might be settling back down to the bit more of the kind of norm as it was. So we might see a few more polls in favor of Trump. Indeed, if we go to look from the 6th of September onward at political polls, a lovely Twitter handle that just compiles all the they're not non-partisan, so they're just like reporting all the different polls. So let's just randomly go through these. Okay, general election poll, a C-rated poll on the 6th was Harris up 2. A B-rated pollster, YouGov, in the Senate, Cruz 8 points against Allred. Now, Allred, is it Colin Allred in Texas, is actually there. That is not good. That doesn't look great for him. But there are a bunch of polls that put him much closer to Ted Cruz. And there are some people getting a little bit excited that Ted Cruz might be on the receiving end. It could be a surprise upset. And there's also some polls out that put Texas within 3 points. Now there you've got Trump 5 points up in that YouGov B-rated pollster, but some other ones have put it 3 points, which is in the margin of error, and people have got super excited that both, I think, was it Florida as well as Texas, you've had Texas trending purple for a long time, and it's a bit of a generational thing and also a migration thing. So as people move in, there's been people moving into Texas that are turning it bluer. And it has been thought that, Beto O'Rourke got pretty close previously. And it's thought that, they're either this election or the next, probably the next election, people are thinking that Texas could really be in play for the Democrats. But there's an outside chance it could be here. Yeah, so Trump, this is one, a poll with leaners. So these people, I presume, that lean one way or the other. And you have Florida and Trump both with this Emerson B-rated pollster, +3. So that is not nearly as much for Trump as one would have expected. EC model here, 538. A 538 model has Harris with 285 electoral college votes and Trump 253. So that one has Harris winning. General election poll here, we have California, Harris up 24, Ohio, Trump up 10, Florida, Trump up 5, Texas, Trump up 4, and that's another one there. So etc. etc. We have fundraising numbers. Harris $361 million in August, Trump 130, and that 361 mainly came from small donations and a lot of women as well, and 130 was mainly, I think, bigger donors for Trump. Now polling market has got them tied at 49% each. That's a betting odds sort of chances there, so that swung back to parity. We've got an electoral college prediction from The Economist has Harris winning by 2. This is where places like here, Nebraska is one of the only 2, it does it up here in Maine as well, one of the only 2 states where the electoral college votes are split in districts. And so instead of the whole state going one way, part of the state can go another way if that district voted that way. So it's likely that Nebraska's 2nd district goes Democrat, and that's super important because remember it's a zero-sum game, so that is worth 2. That goes, so if that one went the other way, then you would have Harris down 1 and Trump up 1, which then puts them neck and neck. So fascinating stuff. What else do we have? General election poll, Trump up 1 for the Siena. That's a New York Times Siena. Then we have Arizona. A-rated pollster has Harris and Trump tied on 48. Another one, Michigan, Harris up 1. Pennsylvania tied. That's a key one. So Pennsylvania is worth 20, and that's big. So 20 away from the Democrats would be added on to the Republicans. You get Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. These 3 are the main battleground ones in the Great Lakes area. Then you have Arizona, Nevada, Arizona, Texas, maybe even close by. I don't really think so. I don't think this election. North Carolina could be one. Georgia, definitely a swing state. And then, Florida, some people are talking about, I don't think there either. Although there might be the odd down ticket race in some of these places that could throw a googly or something. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Anyway, let's move on. There are obviously more polls. Actually, the last one, Trump up 1 in New York Times. So again, New York Times Siena. But yeah. Okay, so that's a map, and those are some places we need to look out for. But really, it's going to be all about Pennsylvania. If the Democrats win Pennsylvania, they should be all right. And so, yeah, everything's about Pennsylvania. Here's another one. This has Harris up 4.3. This is Polling USA average national presidential polling lead. You can see that it's looking much better at the moment for the Democrats, but it might be tailing off a little bit. And then Chris Owicki here says, interesting poll here. This is just pertaining to the UK. So this is a very interesting poll. Reform UK supporters are the only major party supporters in the UK to have a majority in favour of Trump. For all the talk of the Tories and Reform uniting, they're clearly drawing support from quite different groups of people. So for those interested in UK politics, Harris, this is how unpopular Trump is around the world. Republicans, pro-Trump Republicans, don't really realise that most of the rest of the world think Trump is a laughingstock. We are really disparaging about Trump. Even my in-laws who are super conservative, super conservative here. In fact, they are really Reform voters. They are anti-Trump. They think he's an absolute knob. My mum, likewise, my parents are super right-wing, but my dad is losing it a little bit at the moment. And my mum says, he still likes Trump. But my mum said, but he's the only person we know that does. So whenever they talk politics with all the like-minded people that they know, no one likes Trump. So in other words, even if you're right-wing in the UK, he's seen as still a bit of a laughingstock. But he is slightly more popular with Reform. So Reform has Trump at 58% and Harris at 26%. But all the other parties are resoundingly pro-Trump, including the Conservatives, who has Harris up. Resoundingly pro-Harris. The Conservatives have Harris up 34, 57 to Trump's 23. Trump is just deeply unpopular. Look. 16% for Lib Dems, 23% for Conservative, 20% for Labour, and the average across the nation is 26%. It's only Reform that has Trump up at 58%. So just interesting. Right. So we've had some endorsements, major ones. Liz Cheney. Now, she is a super conservative, a proper conservative. You look at her voting record. She's often called a rhino, Republican in name only, by MAGA people who don't like her because she went against Trump. But they're just cultists. But because in reality, she's far more conservative and far more Republican than Trump will ever be in his life. Again, look at her voting record. Don't come at me with any other rubbish. Look at her voting record. And yeah, so you could say that Adam Kinzinger was more of a moderate, but I'd say still Republican. Liz Cheney, you can't argue. And Dick Cheney as well. Her father, who was a former vice president, has also said he's now, so both these people are now endorsing Kamala Harris. So this is what I think it sounds like Wolf Blitzer talking about Dick Cheney, his statement.
Dick Cheney. In our nation's 248-year history, there has never been an individual who was a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump. He tried to steal the last election using lies and violence to keep himself in power after the voters had rejected him. He can never be trusted with power again. As citizens, we each have a duty to put country above partisanship to defend our Constitution. That is why I will be casting my vote for Vice President Kamala Harris. That's a blistering statement.
Longtime member of Congress, a Jerry Ford Republican, then the defense secretary, and then the Vice President of the United States. Again, he.
Interesting fun fact: John King here, CNN commentator. He's got multiple sclerosis, as have I. So, hats off to you, John, for doing your job and doing it well.
He's essentially saying, Republicans, look yourself in the mirror. This guy's a threat to democracy. You have to put your country above your party. And again, Donald Trump, like he does, he poisons the well. He makes people persona non grata so people won't listen to them. That's why he constantly attacks his critics, so that his voters won't listen to them. So we'll have to see as you go through it. But again, my point is it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much in the margin of this election. And this is an opportunity. There's a big debate next week. This is an opportunity for the vice president to talk to Republican voters too, to your Nikki Haley primary voters, to Reagan Bush voters, to people who don't like Donald Trump, to say, you may not like me, you might not know me very well, I'm a Democrat, you may not have voted for me before, and you might not want to vote for a Democrat, but please listen to these respected figures in your former party who think Donald Trump is a threat.
Interesting. And indeed, we have a whole list of, that was it, the list was here. 200 former GOP staffers endorsing Harris, 16 former GOP members of Congress, 12 former GOP White House attorneys, 4 former GOP governors, countless former GOP officials, and they are all endorsing Kamala Harris. Now, former Democrats, Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr., and you can argue they haven't been Democrats for a long time, really. So interesting. Right. I've been going on way too long, haven't I? Goodness me. I'm going to have to bring it to an end here. I was going to talk, I think this is fascinating stuff here with regard to young men skewing to the right and young women skewing to the left, and what might be behind that, and how the Harris campaign deals with that, and how the Trump campaign are looking at appealing to young men. And they're going after gamers, they're going after culture wars stuff, but I'll probably leave that for my next update. I will just say that the money is super important.
Released its fundraising totals for the month of August, pulling in $361 million, bringing her total cash on hand to $404 million.
Huge numbers there. Now, this is having an effect not just in the presidential campaign, but down ballot. Super important. This is Simon Rosenberg on the Courier podcast.
Yeah, no question, but the vibes are very good. And I want to talk about this kind of moment we're in where there is just an extraordinary offensive advantage that the Harris-Walz campaign has, and it feels that Democrats have right now, and folks that are part of this pro-democracy movement. But the campaign in particular, you touched on this. My jaw literally dropped when I saw the headline the other day that the Harris-Walz campaign was moving $25 million from their war chest to down ballot candidates. So Senate.
So what that means is that Senate races and congressional races and governors races and all these, and maybe even lower, they're saying we've got so much money now that we can afford to push some of that money down the ticket to these other races. That will be hugely important. If you start winning, it's about winning the trifecta, the president, the House of Representatives and the Senate. But as also other kind of statewide state senates and governorships, as mentioned. And if this money is flowing down tickets, that means that the Democrats are in a really healthy position to do well in this election, all other things remaining equal. And the question is, are the Republicans able to do that? No, it appears that they are lacking in money, and some of that money appears to be disappearing. And some people are saying there's still a lot of money going to legal expenses on behalf of Trump's legal woe.
Senate, House, and state legislative candidates and governor's races across the country. This has not been done in many cycles by a campaign. It demonstrates not only their financial strength right now, which we know is extraordinary because Vice President Harris has raised more than any presidential candidate online and with grassroots donations. It's been incredible to watch the past month, but also from a political standpoint, this is really smart politically for them to do this, not only to help ensure that Democrats win races up and down the ballot, but it's also a very savvy political move because it builds a lot of alliances and allies. And, as Vice President Harris very much didn't have a external political role to play, right? Or building a political war chest of her own. This was all a surprise for all of us, including her, that she would find herself at the top of the ticket right now, so close to Election Day. So I'm curious, did you have the same reaction to me when you saw that?
I think it does another thing, Tara, is that it also starts getting Republicans asking Donald Trump about what they're doing for them. And because our party is unified, we're all working together. We're all on the same team. We are, expanding our coalition. Things are good internally in the family. The Republicans are a mess. The internal politics of their party is a mess. It's every man and woman for themselves. Trump is, lots of money is disappearing. We don't know where it's going. We're assuming it's going to legal bills, but they're not matching us on the air. We don't really know where their money's going. And so it also creates tension, I think, inside their party. It was also very strategically smart for that reason as well. And I will tell you that in DC this week, we're now back, right, from the Labor Day holiday. You can see a vibe shift going on in the DC-based media and like The Hill and Politico. You're starting to see stories about Republicans panicking. And Politico had a big story on the Republicans panicking about the huge financial advantage that Democrats have. That's getting bigger, by the way. It's not getting smaller. They're not closing the gap. And I think that one of the things a lot of these stories are missing is that money translates not just into ads, but it also translates in the intensity that we're seeing, but also translates into grassroots support. We have more volunteers than we've ever had. We're knocking on doors and making phone calls right now in ways and reaching out to voters at critical moments when they're still kind of checking into the race. We have the most powerful grassroots operation that the Democratic Party has ever had. And so I think in many ways, these articles that are just focusing on the media part of this are underestimating the real strength the Democratic Party has now. And you're starting to see it show up in these blind quotes from Republicans getting very worried about what they're seeing.
Yeah. And he talks in that about intensity. He mentioned it there. I don't know how they measure intensity. I don't quite know what it means. He doesn't explain it, but he shows a graph that I don't know. You can pick it out wherever, but he says that the intensity at the moment of the Democratic campaign is unparalleled. So there is this real intensity that the Democrats are experiencing, and the Republicans are maybe in a bit of a tailspin, but it's going to be, so this is what I'm going to finish. Hopefully that was all of interest and of some kind of use. And yeah, it's all kind of pro-Democrat, and isn't Trump an incoherent mess? Yeah. Okay. And I have my biases, but it's true. Like it's demonstrably true that Trump is policy vacuous. Prove otherwise. Prove me wrong. I'll sit at that table in that meme with the sign, prove me wrong. Trump, I think, is appealing to the wrong people, still trying to just appeal to the rich. He's got Elon Musk, he's got the tech bros on his side. They're going to help amplify his message to a certain people, like these younger men, and I'm sorry I didn't get into that, but these younger men, and you're seeing this huge difference between young men and young women in their political allegiances, but actually young women are way outdoing young men in terms of skewing Democrat. But that is something that needs to be looked into. It's all going to come down to the debate in terms of like appealing to the public. And as mentioned in some of these, with some of these analysts, it's I think it was John King that was saying that's Kamala Harris's opportunity to speak to a broad coalition. You've had Simon Rosenberg there talking about we've got this great coalition together, and there is a coalition of former GOP endorsers, of all these segments of the electorate, bringing people together, talking about joy, talking about unity. There's a lot of division over there. Talking about, it'll be a bloody story trying to get rid of all those immigrants and like real kind of fear. And this is all about unity and middle America and working class Americans. Can they build on that momentum? Can they get Pennsylvania? Can they get Georgia again? Can they get North Carolina? What about, it looks like Michigan and Wisconsin are all right. I would have much more faith in those remaining with the Democrats, but certainly it's going to be about Pennsylvania. Keep your eyes on that one. Anyway, thanks guys for watching. It's been a long one. It always is. Sorry, not sorry. I do love talking about these topics and picking out the bits from media that you might have missed and trying to bring it together to give you a kind of flavor of what's going on. Polls are settling down a little bit. It's going to be this next week's going to be a fascinating one. Take care, guys. Speak to you soon.